Me. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the final debate of term. This House believes tabloid journalism is bad for Britain. You will now have to forgive us because we have to do the egotistical part. Well, I mean, this whole thing's egotistical, but the specifically, obviously egotistical part of tonight's debate where we have to hand over. So, going first, who wants to go first? Charlotte, would you like to, resign first? Charlotte Ivers has been the treasurer this term. She's the reason that we have any money at all, and we owe her an enormous debt of gratitude. She is, we owe. She is going off to become president-elect, so frankly, she's going on to bigger and better things. But Charlotte Ivers tonight is being replaced by Charlotte Petter. My ENTS officer tonight unfortunately can't be here because she has a job interview because she's just become recently unemployed. But she is being represented by Paige, who's going to be tonight's ENTS officer. Asia has done an enormous amount for this building. Who put your hand up if you're a fresher? The Freshers' Ball was all thanks to Asia, and she's done a phenomenal job this term. So Asia is being replaced by Ash and Andy. This term's speaker program has been pretty brilliant, and the reason I can say that without sounding arrogant is because I had nothing to do with it. It has all been thanks to the man standing 2 places to my right, Sachin Prathlingham. He has put together the most phenomenal array of speakers and has just done a brilliant job. Sachin is being replaced by Joshua Ellis. The person who puts together every single debate that happens at the union and also acts as the president's person that catches everything that the president misses is the executive officer. Fred has just done the most phenomenal job as my executive officer, and if it wasn't for him, this term would not be what it is today. So, Fred, thank you so much for everything you have done. Fred is being replaced by, oh my God, this is one of those brain freezes. Fred is being replaced by... I'm really very drunk. Fred Vincent is being replaced by Catherine Regler. Usually what happens at this point is I hand over to the next president. However, I've decided to elect myself president pro tempore and will remain forever. No! The person I want to thank before I go is somebody that makes this building what it is. The person who really runs the union is the vice president. The vice president serves for a year and is appointed, and so doesn't go through the whole election thing. And William, who's the person sitting right in front of me, if it wasn't for him, this term just wouldn't have happened. He's been the most amazing vice president, and I think everyone here owes him an enormous debt of gratitude. So thank you, William Fitzallen-Howard. So that's it. About 6 minutes ago, I became unemployed at exactly 8 o'clock, and I'm being replaced by somebody who I have no doubt will do an amazing job as your Lent president. I'm being replaced by James Hart. Good luck.
For having me, really. I can only hope that my term goes better than forgetting one of my officers' names. Before we move on with the debate tonight, there was one person who just missed out on a whole load of thanks, and that is, of course, Oliver, who's just left. He referenced it being an incredible term, and he gave all the credit away, but that's just not true. Oliver has done so much for the union over the past 2 years that he's been involved. Most of the big changes that you've seen, the member streaming service, the AV upgrade that's improved everything, all of the bicentenary events this year were thanks hugely to Oliver's hard work. And he still managed to put on an incredible term. So please, as he leaves for the final time, can you join me in thanking Oliver for his term? So this is it. This is the final debate of our 200th anniversary. As you can tell, it's nearly Christmas by these beautiful decorations. I have no idea who was responsible for those, but I think it might have been Oliver as well. But in this debate, we turn to asking the questions about the tabloid press and its position within British journalism and culture. Does it truly benefit society? Celebrity culture, phone hacking, media ethics, press freedom will all be discussed as Michaelmas draws to a close, placing the tabloid press firmly under the spotlight. If you want to get involved, check the back of your order papers. It will show you how to interrupt during the debate, and you are, of course, welcome to make a point. If you're watching on the live stream, then tonight's hashtag is CUSTabloids, and tweet us, and I will try to read out some of your questions. But before you get involved, let's hear from one of our expert speakers tonight, and I'll hand over to Archie Bland, who's a journalist, currently works for The Guardian as a commissioning editor, and was formerly the youngest ever deputy editor of The Independent. Archie, the floor is yours.
I wish I could just announce my replacement, walk out of the room, and then have them come in here instead of me, but I can't. And I realise that working for The Guardian and standing up here and talking about how I think tabloids are bad for Britain will make me seem like a terrible cliche, but actually, I really like tabloid newspapers. I used to buy The Sun every day as a teenager, which I realise will date me to the Stone Age for most people here. And when I worked at Varsity, we wanted it to be more like The Mirror than we wanted it to be like The Guardian. It's still the tabloids that I look at first every day. And I spend so much time, honestly, on the Mail sidebar of shame that when I go to The Guardian's own homepage and don't see a Kardashian somewhere on the right-hand side, I sort of feel a bit weird. So when tabloids are good, I think they're a really great thing. I think they're one of the best things about being British. There are lots of places in the world where the popular press and serious reporting are not the same thing, and that's not been true here historically. Here, reporting and campaigning have been something that the tabloids, the red tops, have done just as well or better than the broadsheets, and that's been a really proud part of our history. But, you know, that tone has sometimes been bumptious or adolescent, sometimes it verges into the aggressive. That's just been sort of part of the tapestry of national life. And when Freddie Starr eats a hamster or David Mellor sucks on someone's toes, it just sort of adds to the sense of the gaiety of the nation. It basically made Britain a more interesting place to live, because life isn't all about, you know, autumn statements. Tabloids in the past have always known who their readers are, and they've known how to speak to them. And I think they've been great. But I'm over on this side of the room. And the reason for that is because I think all of the stuff that I've just described is something that we've lost. The argument is not that tabloids are bound to be bad for Britain. The argument is that tabloids, as they exist today, are sort of in a crisis. They're a shadow of the former selves. They've been embattled by Leveson, and they've been crippled by an economic model that doesn't really work anymore. The overall effect of that is that you have a popular press now that, instead of making the world more interesting with all those sucking toes, makes it uglier instead. So to explain that, I want to say what's happened and why and what the results of that have been. And I guess the best place to start is with the most obvious milestone in the recent history of tabloids, which is the Leveson scandal, or rather the phone hacking scandal that led to the Leveson inquiry, which is, I think, possibly the most boring sentence you can say in a debate, and I'm very sorry about that. The Leveson story is ancient history, and it makes my eyes glaze over. But the fact of the matter is it is very important. You can't deny that the front pages before the Leveson inquiry came up were a million times more interesting than they've been since then. Partly that's because people have changed their voicemail codes. That's great. And, you know, those shameful practices are not part of journalism. But actually, the other thing that's happened is there's been a kind of a loss of nerve on the part of the tabloid press. The papers used to be braver and more self-confident and more ruthless. They realized also, most importantly, that getting good stories takes legwork, takes time, and costs money, and they were prepared to invest all of that. It's different now. In 2015, I suspect if my colleague over here wanted to get up to whatever he wanted to get up to in his basement, then it wouldn't end up in a newspaper. And I think that's a really good thing, because that's a vital change in the way that we perceive privacy, and that's very much for the better. But what turns out to have happened at the same time is that the tabloids have kind of lost their energy, have lost a much larger sense of their culture, which turns out to be part of the same thing that produced the worst of tabloid journalism. Partly that's because of the end of hacking, it's also because of money, and when there's less money, the temptation to do something cheaper is very, very strong. The result these days is that you have a diet in the tabloids that is pretty straightforward and I would say pretty grim. You get brokered PR celebrity bullshit on the one hand, where you have an agent and an editor talking about exactly how a story will be presented on the front page, and then you have incredibly aggressive political demagoguery on the other hand. The celebrity thing may just seem like froth and may not matter that much to you if you don't care about journalism, so we can sort of gloss over that. But I think the hysterical political aggression that's become part of the mix is a really crucial thing for everyone, and that's what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the time. There are examples of this every 5 seconds, honestly, and I wondered whether there would be one in the immediate run-up to this debate, and sure enough, last week we had a really good example, which was the front page of The Sun with the headline, 1 in 5 Brit Muslims sympathy for jihadis. That, very soon after the Paris attacks, is an incendiary headline to run, and I don't think you should run that headline until you're very sure that it stacks up. But The Sun cannot have been sure of that, simply because it didn't. If you look into the facts of that story, just to take one example, then what you find is that actually the people who are asked that question were not asked specifically about ISIS fighters, but about anyone going to Syria who may therefore have included moderates. And also the headline and the whole presentation of the story confused sympathy with support. I'm sympathetic for a lot of nutters who I don't agree with about anything. Then there's the other point, which is that actually the previous time that they'd done the same poll back in March, the figures were actually higher. Not only that, but they were broadly comparable to the rest of the population. So the idea that this displays some scandalous attitudes on the part of British Muslims is just complete nonsense. The only correction that ever turned up was in the Times. The motion tonight is that tabloids are bad for Britain, and that is a very high bar to set. But I think a story like this amply clears that bar. First of all, it's not honest. It might be technically justifiable in a way that you can quote on Twitter, or when someone makes a complaint you can refer to, but it's not actually true, and I think probably most editors, if you sat them down over a drink and they were sure there was no recording device nearby, would admit as much. Then there's the point that it just replaces proper reporting, going out and getting a story, with clickbait, basically, with cheap headline generation through doing a poll. And that's very bad for journalism and therefore bad for all of us. And then I think this is the thing that you probably will relate to the most. It just makes everyone so angry. You know, there's this kind of British Muslims who feel misrepresented will feel angry towards The Sun. Sun readers who trust The Sun will feel angry towards British Muslims. And everyone else will just feel angry that we live in a country, in a universe in which this kind of stuff is allowed to go on and on and on. And it just kind of makes you weary. You know, it doesn't make you outraged anymore. It's sort of dreary and depressing and relentless. And it's so clearly a tone that makes Britain a worse place to live. So I think what's interesting there is to look behind the story at what motivates it, and I think it's a toxic problem that is basically the same thing that you will get in many, many other stories of the same sort. It's editing not to find out what the story is, it's editing to serve an agenda that already exists and to fit the story into the story that you want to tell. That's the problem with knowing your audience really well, actually, is that if you know your audience too well and you lose your confidence, you start, instead of trying to kind of test yourself and figure out the things that they will be interested in that they might not have already thought about, you just appeal to the stuff they already think because you've been perpetuating it for a long time. And if all you're doing is enforcing people's views that they already hold, and this goes across the political spectrum from the left to the right, then you're probably not presenting a very honest account of the world. What's basically happened is that tabloids have stopped boiling things down and they've started making things up. This trend, when you notice it, is everywhere. You know, yes, The Sun ditched page 3, but it only did so after it realized that the only 2 tits that people wanted to see in the paper anymore were Kelvin Mackenzie and Katie Hopkins. And, you know, but that was nothing to do with a kind of a sense that this was the right thing to do. It was just because they realized that the tone of the public conversation had changed and they had to follow it. Or look, I think really shockingly, at the story of Aylan Kurdi, who you will remember was the little boy who was washed up on the shores of a Turkish beach. That photograph went around the world, and for a moment, it kind of changed the terms of the debate about immigration and refugees in particular, and that seemed like an important thing. But what it turned out had actually happened was that the papers had kind of got a whiff of the fact that the public mood had been shocked by this picture. For 1 or 2 days, they changed it, and then as soon as that picture kind of started to recede from view, the same tone recurred again. We just went back to the same old model. It was just rank hypocrisy. I think all of these stories follow basically the same model, and I think it is one that is across the tabloid press at the moment. I think it's pandering, I think it's fearful, I think it's dishonest, I think it's moralizing, and I think it's cynical. I think it is definitely bad for Britain, and I haven't even talked to you about the Daily Express.
Thank you very much, Archie. We're now going to move straight on to Oliver himself. I want to stress, after having said so many nice things about him when I started, that he actually wrote his intro. So the mean thing I'm about to say is from him, not from me. But Oliver is the outgoing president of the Cambridge Union, a former parliamentary researcher, and his surname is almost certainly the only interesting thing about him. Oliver, the floor is yours.
I mean, literally shut up. Most of you are my friends, so it's not a fair cheer. Apologies for walking out of the debate halfway through. It's because I find Archie insufferably annoying. No, it's not that at all. It's just that the new speakers officer forgot to put my notes on my chair, so I was going to be speaking blind for a while. The House may find it quite strange that I am opposing tonight's motion, considering my own personal family history and indeed my experiences with our dear friends, the the tabloid press, this term. Yeah, you go, guys. Yeah, die. The fact of the matter is, when I was 13 years old, in my second week of boarding school, I was confronted at 6 a.m. in the morning by a picture on the front of the News of the World of my naked cousin twice removed, engaging in something that looked a lot more fun than what I was doing at the time. You know it. You were there. The fact of the matter is, we fast forward, and like most Cambridge students, the Daily Mail has followed me like a praying mantis. The first thing I did was, as a fresher, be the eligible bachelor. I went for the TAB's eligible bachelor's competition. Seconds later, there was a picture of me beside Oswald Mosley in the Daily Mail saying, "Who's more eligible?" It's me. For like a lot of reasons. The second I became president of the Cambridge Union, the article that they ran was "Mosley Scion Rises to Power." So you think that we take ourselves seriously. The Daily Mail takes us a lot more seriously. Then when I did the TAB Best Bums competition, which I accept was a mistake, they don't know it, and they still don't know it, so I hope they're not watching. My bum was also on the Daily Mail, and all of us here have felt the effects of the tabloid press following us around. The fact of the matter is, when we came to this term, the Cambridge TAB decided to dig their claws in. The union in meltdown was a personal highlight, considering that we had the same amount of resignations as the TAB, but unfortunately nobody follows them. We all ran around for a while saying the Freshers' Ball theme should be meltdown, just for fun. But the fact of the matter is that later on, a dear article which I've grown to love, the Weekly News Roundup, I was accused of the power going to my head. I was accused of practicing my establishment rhetoric for my career ambitions. Yeah, that's fair. They took a screenshot of a wall post I wrote, of a wall post that my best friend wrote, where he called me an arsehead sarcastically, thought it was serious, and ran an article about how I was losing the support of my friends. But the reason I'm opposing this motion is because it's about time this House took a stand. The union, in my 2.5 years of experience and talking to former officers, never likes anything. We never endorse anything. Everything is bad or damaging or problematic, from governments to pornography to the music industry. Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Sarah Sheard, Hamilton College. Surely the huge banners behind you saying Deloitte.
It's fair. The union thinks everything is bad, but Deloitte is bloody great. That's right. Good job, Deloitte. Well done. No, by the union, I mean the membership. The membership think that everything is bad or damaging or problematic. Governments, pornography, the music industry, the nature of Western politics, democracy, the union votes against it. We think everything's bad. We love things to be bad. And the reason I'm speaking in opposition tonight is because despite the fact that we are almost certainly on the wrong side of what public opinion in this room currently is, and despite the fact that, by God, have we shot ourselves in the foot with the second speaker for the opposition. I mean, there are no jokes I can make that will save us from that. Despite the fact that I'm opposing it, is that we should take a stand and we should say that tabloid journalism is not bad for Britain, because it can't be. My colleagues will develop our argument, but we begin with two very simple reasons why tabloid journalism cannot be bad for Britain. Reason number one, we argue that tabloid journalism is reflective of the society within which it operates. It is not the other way around. Second of all, we argue that the examples of bad practice within the tabloids cannot be used to disregard an entire profession. Now, we've heard a sort of doom and gloom analysis of the tabloids from the first speaker of the proposition, which I would contend with, but I won't bore you with the details why. The opposition considers tabloid journalism as a style which emphasizes sensationalist topics with sensationalist headlines, the personal lives of celebrities and individuals, and uses, frankly, down-to-earth language. The fact of the matter is, whether you like it or not, this is reflective of British society. News, to a lot of people who have busy lives, needs to be easy to understand. The opinions that come across in tabloid journalism far stronger than in the broadsheet press, where they are more readily disguised. The opinions are what people want to see. They want to get cross about things. They read tabloid press because they like getting cross about things. They like reading things and going, no, I don't agree with that, or I do agree with that, or yes, let's, kill immigrants. The fact of the matter is, that's what people want to see. It's wrapped up in gossip, it's wrapped up in rumor, it's wrapped up in sensationalism. But the fact of the matter is that tabloid press, frankly, is a product of the market. The market demands, the people demand to see a form of press which is like the tabloid press. We have created, as a public, a tabloid press that feeds our desires. And it is wrong to say that the tabloids create us. There is an enormous amount of sociological evidence to suggest that we shape our surroundings. We choose what we read. And the reason for that is that we like to read what we agree with. Facebook has added an unfollow option exactly for this. We don't want to read things that we don't agree with. We read the papers that, compare to our opinions. Now, the result of this is that the public, the tabloid press do not shape the public shape the tabloid press. We shape our environments what we want to see. We read papers that share our worldview. And media coverage has been proven to lag behind public opinion. So to decry tabloid journalism is frankly elitist. It's decrying society. It's from the ivory tower that is the Cambridge Union, I can say that now. It's saying that the fact that the most read student newspaper for under 35s in the country is The Sun, the second read most read newspaper is the Daily Mail, the third most read paper is the Daily Mirror, we say no, we know better. To suggest that we know better than the people out there who want to read these papers, considering there is very little evidence to suggest the idea that individuals are shaped by what they read, is patronizing, elitist, and illogical. Yes, go ahead. Nah, it's fine. Just go, it's fine.
Isn't it also patronising the fact that you assume that we don't read those newspapers just because we happen to be at the union?
Point next, Cambridge Tab, readership. I'm coming there. What I've been doing so far is try to persuade you all that you're all brilliant and that you all read the broadsheets and that you're all very clever and intelligent, etc., etc. But I'm now moving on to the actual argument, which is that all of you read the Cambridge Tab. The Cambridge Tab is the most read student newspaper in Cambridge. I was once told that on its own, it's the most read student newspaper in Europe. Even if you add together all the other tabs, it's still the most read student newspaper. The fact of the matter is, we're all part of this culture that contributes to this system of journalism. And the Cambridge Tab are all very happy over there. They think they're, yeah, well done, guys. Again, die. In sum, Britain is bad for tabloid. Britain may be bad for tabloid journalism, but tabloid journalism cannot be bad for Britain. Otherwise, you deny Britain by voting with the proposition. The second point is that tabloid journalism cannot be defined by its failures, and it's unfair to do so. The proposition have likely and will likely characterize the tabloids by their failures. Phone hacking, for example, was seen as the big failure of tabloid journalism, but frankly, phone hacking was immediately punished by the law. The tabloids found very quickly they couldn't do it. Illegal practice was stopped. You cannot say that a subset of tabloid journalism, which phone hacked, which admittedly did something wrong, you can then use that to throw the entire bath, baby, and water out all at the same time. And it's wrong, and it's unfair. Privacy intrusion is common across the media. You can't label the tabloid press and say, you invade privacy. Everyone invades privacy. That's how... Yes, go ahead. It's not. It's frankly not untrue. You know it for a fact. Okay, well, you work in the press, so if you don't mind, I'm going to assume you're wrong. The fact of the matter is, tabloid intrusion, broadsheet intrusion, is what it is. It's intrusion. Now, I don't disagree with you. I don't think intrusion is a bad thing. That's how we hold people to account. But nonetheless, it is intrusion as it is. I can't, because I've got to continue. No, as in I can't, so as in like no. Sorry. Essentially, do not presume tonight that a vote for the other side is a vote against people like Katie Hopkins. Do not think that by voting for the proposition, you are voting against all the bad elements of tabloid journalism. You're voting against tabloid journalism. As a result, you are denying society, you are denying a media that appeals to the masses and is read by the masses and makes news and comment more accessible. You are rejecting the attempt, you are characterizing tabloid journalism by its excesses. Now, there is a great belief amongst people in Cambridge, the union committees, everyone, that the union doesn't matter. They believe that the votes that are cast in this chamber don't mean anything. However, in my view, what is said in this place as students matters. I've had the privilege, this is my segue into thanking people, I've had the privilege of working alongside some amazing people who have put this term together, and they have done so much for this building, and I pay tribute to them. But what you say in this building matters. And I would ask you tonight to vote with the opposition. And the reason I say that is because I ask you, for the first time, please don't vote against something because you define it by its excesses. Please don't vote against something because it is potentially, with that floor speech aside, is potentially more popular to people outside this building, not within it. Don't vote against it because you disagree with it. Vote with the opposition because tabloid journalism appeals to the masses, because tabloid journalism is far wider than the excesses that are probably going to be mentioned by the proposition, and does far more for Britain, and does far more for investigative journalism than you possibly realize. Don't vote against it as a result, and I ask you tonight to vote with the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Now is the chance where you get to contribute to the debate. And given the number of POIs in that speech, I think there are lots of people keen to. There's also people on Twitter as well. So do tweet us your points. It'll give you 2 chances of saying what you want to. But let's start off. Do we have any points in proposition of the motion? People who believe that tabloid journalism is bad for Britain? We'll go out the back.
Thanks. Till Schiffer, Homerton College. I'd like to question the first speaker of the opposition on the entire first half of his speech, where he described with great eloquence and detail how, Britain was partly to blame for tabloid journalism. It's consumption rates or just generally, but somehow the British populace form British tabloids. But surely that says more about Britain being quite masochistic. It doesn't mean that it's good for Britain or that it's in any way good or bad for Britain. It just means that people like getting angry about these sorts of things. So how does people liking tabloids in any way correlate, or where's there a causal relationship between that and it being bad for Britain? Thank you.
Oliver, do you want a chance to respond, or are you going to take the characterization of eloquent and leave it at that? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to the opposition. Does anyone have a point in opposition of the motion? Yeah, just over here. Can someone get a mic over?
Hi, Lydia Day, Jesus College. A lot of the points that Archie brought us in his opening speech about how tabloid newspapers simply know their audiences too well, sound exactly like the kind of material that The Guardian runs day in, day out with their quinoa recipes and environmental holidays. I feel like that's equally applicable on both sides of the house.
And do we have any points in abstention of the motion? Things you'd like clarified? Yeah, down at the front.
Charlotte Ivers, Pembroke College. I should stress also this is the last presidential debate where I'm allowed to drink, so I apologise what's about to happen. So I think we talked about how broadsheets are just as bad as tabloids. That's not the motion. The motion is that tabloids are bad. If broadsheets are bad as well, then that's nothing to do with this. That's just companions in the guild. Actually, we're talking about tabloids being bad. If broadsheets are bad as well, that's not a problem for this debate.
We don't have that much through on Twitter yet, so I'm going to stay in the room. Does anyone want to make another point in proposition of the motion? Nope. You're all keen during Oliver's speech? Yeah, down at the front.
Richard Parkins, Trinity College. I'm afraid I'm going to attack Oliver's speech as well. Oliver is basically saying that the tabloid press is formed by the people of Britain and is giving the people of Britain what they want. Well, that may be true, but that doesn't mean that giving the people of Britain what they want is good for us. Most of us want lots of unhealthy sugary drinks. Most of us want to eat far too much food than is good for us. Most of us want to do far too much travelling than would suit the environment and waste resources in all sorts of other ways. Just because we want it doesn't mean it isn't bad for Britain.
Yeah, Oliver, do you want to respond to that?
So you want to control everything. You want to say tabloid journalism is bad because it feeds a desire which people shouldn't have. Well, frankly, people have it, and it's wrong for you to say that we should get rid of tabloid journalism. Tabloid journalism is bad for Britain because it feeds the desire, and for you to stand here in the Cambridge Union and say, no, I'm going to tell you what you should be reading and what you should be thinking. I think that's wrong.
I didn't actually say we should get rid of it. I said it was bad for Britain. There is a distinction there.
Does someone else want to make a point in opposition of the motion? No one? Okay. Oh, sorry, I can't say the slides. Yeah, at the back.
People who are here for the emergency debate will know I don't really have much to do in my spare time. So the other night I was reading a history of the Cambridge Union and I came across Karan Thapar's entry about how he was president in 1978 and despite most of the House not really agreeing with him because he was president, he won. I will just say I think it's a tradition that the president wins, so on that basis I support the opposition. Thank you.
That's good news then. Does anyone have any points in abstention before we go back to the main debate? You don't get to speak. In which case, we will move on to the second speaker for the proposition, who is someone probably known well to everyone in second year and above. He's Patrick Brooks. He is a third-year English student. He's not, he's a second-year English student. He's done first year several times. But more importantly, was formerly editor of the Cambridge Tab. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Hello. Sorry, I have my notes. When I was asked to do this debate and said that I would be in proposition, I was quite worried because, quite frankly, the motion is so obviously correct that to try and write a speech that isn't incredibly boring is very difficult. Look, The Guardian is great. You do good stuff, Archie, but it's boring. It's really boring. The Independent, The Guardian, all that stuff. Traditional balanced journalism is not interesting to read. We do it because we feel we have to or because we want to look morally impressive to our friends on Facebook, but it's boring to read, and everyone in this room knows that. And look, when I came to Cambridge, before I got here, I was quite nervous. I was worried about it. I was thinking, oh, this huge institution, and it is terrifying. It's terrifying being here. I was terrified, and then I read some articles on the Cambridge Tab, and they were cheeky and they were fun, and they really cheered me up, and I thought, it's going to be okay. These people have a sense of humor. and I'll be all right. And the Cambridge Tab was wonderful, is wonderful. And it was cheeky, and it took the piss, and it's a parody of a tabloid newspaper, and it's what everything a tabloid newspaper should be, which is fun and illicit and naughty, and saying things that we kind of think, and being gossipy. And the Cambridge Tab is great because it doesn't hurt people. It's a tiny microcosm of real tabloids, and it doesn't ruin people's lives. On that point.
I mean,
it doesn't. You're fine. You're doing okay.
I'm fine. I could be better.
Yeah, I mean, no, Oliver is not living a ruined life. And so, yeah, I was the editor of the Tab last year, and I had a huge amount of fun. Like, absolutely the most fun I've ever had. I stood naked on that throne and took a picture of my bum that was seen by 1 million people. That was great. I asked Robert Downey Jr. how big his penis was, which was weird, but great. And that's what tabloid journalism should be. It should be fun, it should be cheeky, and when it's best, as Archie said, it's great. But it's not that, and we all know that. And the problem is, look, Oliver's right. We all want tabloid journalism. We read it covertly, and we hate it, but we love it. We love it. It's so fun. And, you know, as this guy said very well, just because you want something doesn't mean it's good for you. Like, people really like cigarettes. Like, there are literally lots of people who are physically addicted to them. Doesn't mean they're good for them. Like, fast food, all that, you know, porn, it doesn't mean it's good. It's awful. And, you know, we're human beings. We have very base desires. We have, we're cruel and we hate things. And we used to be, you know, I would like to say that we've improved as people from about 2,000 years ago. And now that we're better, it doesn't mean our base desires have changed. We work on things and we try and move away from things that are bad from us. Tabloid journalism does not do that. Look, okay, when I told people that I was going to be debating against Katie Hopkins, the reactions were really interesting. Some of them were like, oh, she's awful. And a lot of them were like, oh my God, that's amazing. I hope she says something disgusting. They were excited. They were absolutely, they couldn't wait for her to say something provocative. And they get like a thrill. We get a thrill of feeling superior, going, yeah, well, you know, we're better than her. We wouldn't say that. Oh, it's so exciting. And that's what fuels tabloid journalism. It fuels that we love to read it. Everyone loves to read it. If you hate reading is a huge thing. The Mail Online gets 1 million hits a day. 1 million hits. It's the most read news website in the world. And a lot of those hits are people who, you know, do it covert. You read the sidebar of shame at work when no one's looking, and we love it. We love it. And it's because, you know, these writers are smart. Tabloid journalists are not stupid. They're not idiots. They're not even right-wing. They're left-wing, smart, articulate people working in London. Not you, sorry. The editors and the normal writers. Katie Hopkins, I'm not going to attack you, okay? I feel sorry for you. I feel genuinely sorry for you. You're being exploited by people who want you to take the hate that they deserve. The editors who give you a platform are the people we should hate. And you should really be ranting on a private blog. But they know that you'll... Yes, sure.
Patrick, love your study. Please do mansplain that woman's success more to her than you already are doing.
Fair enough. Sorry, yeah, fair point, Charlotte. Charlotte, another editor of the Tab. It's a great place. So yeah, where I was going from. So
You were sort of having a go at me.
I was having a go. I've done that now. It's over. So I edited the Tab for a term. I understand what it's like to be an editor of a tabloid. Nobody else speaking here has edited a tabloid. Mine was a tiny tabloid, but I got a whiff of the power of someone telling you about an event that's happened, and you know that you can choose any of the details. You can choose any of the details and spin it a huge amount until it's what you want it to be. And every paper has that. Every editor knows what that's like, because you have to choose details. You have to emphasize certain things to fit your agenda. And it's always a balance. It's always a balance between what actually happened and how far you can push it to fit your agenda. And like this happened to me even though I was running a paper for free. I was running for free in my own time for fun. And you get obsessed by the hits. You get obsessed by the success, and it becomes everything. And you go, how can we make this the most compelling story? It's about storytelling. Tabloid journalists are fantastic storytellers. They take anything, they pick the best details, they make people want to read it. And that's how it works. So, you know, someone gave me a tip 2 weeks in of my term, and they said, this guy, Jesus, doing this really weird art thing where he's pulling film tape out of his anus to represent the degradation of modern art. And I was like, as a person, I was like, that's probably really cool. He's probably a really cool guy, really thought about it. It's going to be great. As a tabloid journalist, I was like, oh my God, yes. Headline, Cambridge student pulls film tape out of their arse. Got 40,000 hits. It was great. And he found me in the pub and he was like, Patrick, why did you do that? You knew that I was doing this proper long performance art thing. And I was like, yeah, I know. But I was a tabloid journalist. And they don't care. They're clever people, but they don't care. And the Cambridge tab is fun because it doesn't have an impact on the world. But you all know that the British tabloids do have an impact on the world. There's real people being affected by it. I don't have to go through it. It'd be boring to go through all the stats and the horrible things they've done, so I'm not going to. But it's not a joke to them. It is a joke to them. That's what's scary. It's a joke to them. They're at the Daily Mail, and they're having a great time, and they get paid really well. And they do. They get paid really well, and they're treated really well. They're treated really well. And it's a huge, big, it's like a decades-long piece of performance art. And they love it. They love it. They can write something, and 10 minutes later, there's a petition, and people are just like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I'm very proud of my time at the Cambridge Tab. Some things I'm ashamed of. I'm genuinely ashamed of, I published an article, I didn't write it, but as I know, it's the editors who have the responsibility. And this guy wrote an article about how Northerners were stupid, and he found them annoying. And I published it, and a lot of people quite rightly said that it was despicable, and to say that, to publish an article in the Cambridge Tab that's going to be read by 17-year-olds from the north who might want to apply, and if they get discouraged from applying by that, that's had a negative impact on the world. I also published an article about how central colleges were inherently superior to, and I wrote that, and I'm not even at a central college. And I loved it. I loved the thrill of trolling people, and then people were posting things being like, this has ruined my day, I feel a bit shit. And that's not nice. And real tabloids are like that, but times 100. Actual people's lives being ruined. You know, there isn't a refugee crisis in Cambridge, but there is in the real world, and tabloids are not helping it. And you all know, tabloids are not good. They're just not obviously not good for us. This debate is spurious. It's fast food. Cigarettes, they appeal to our basest desires. We want to be better than that. We want to keep improving as a society, and we're not going to do that if we just symbiotically continue the relationship of giving ourselves exactly what we want. Clickbait is happening. The tabloid shouldn't really exist as a term anymore because it's not about the type of newspaper you hold. Nobody holds newspapers. It's about websites, about headlines, and clickbait is happening, and the only way we can stop it is by, I don't know how we're going to stop it. Online journalism is vaguely fucked, and it's scary. It's really scary, and it should be scary to all of you that all we want is to be angry and more polarized and more aggressively with our tribe and against the other tribe, and it's terrifying because there's all this new technology and all these new conflicts, and we're just fucked, quite frankly. And tabloid journalism is not helping. It's really not helping, and we need journalists to be on the forefront of all these changes and actually improving things and telling us things we don't know about Syria and stuff, and doing it in a way that's considered and is not about making money and is not about getting hits. And they're not doing that, and they're not going to do that until, we can't ban them. I don't want to ban them. I'm saying they're bad. I don't want to ban them. There's nothing we can do at the moment, and it's just terrifying, quite frankly. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'm going to take this opportunity to read out a couple of tweets. I've gone for the 2 tweets that have been favorited and retweeted most. Democracy in action. The fact that they've both come from that corner of the room is, in fact, slightly concerning. So Finn McRedmond, who is on the Tab team, would like to send their love back to Oliver. And Ellie Alcott is asking if I'm wearing a crown. I can't really see, but apparently I've been hashtagged Tinsel Angel. So before we move on to our second speaker for the opposition, I'm going to take this moment for absolutely no reason in particular to remind you that it is the speaker's time and that you can offer a point of information, and I indeed encourage you to do so, but the speaker has every right, and we indeed encourage them if they wish to say no thank you, at which point please politely sit down. So in that instance, I'll hand over to our second proposition speaker, Katie Hopkins, who is a newspaper columnist, media personality, and first known for being on the 2007 series of The Apprentice. Katie.
Thank you. And I'd like to override all that. So I'd like to say, interrupt when the hell you like. Ask what the hell you want, and say anything you like whenever you like, because this, indeed, is the joy of freedom of speech. And if we have to actually monitor the type of questions we think we ought to ask for fear of offence, then perhaps we've already lost something great. Now, I'd like anybody who's particularly enamored with the Islamic movement in the UK to stand up at this juncture, turn their back, and then maybe walk out of the room. This is a good time for doing that. Please feel free. No, no one? You want to go? Go, go. What, Dolly, point of clarification? Is he allowed yet? You are allowed. Go. Go you. What's your name, Dolly? Having a mic. You've got, that's quite a reach. What's your name?
Oh, my name's Amin. I'm from Sydney Sussex College. What exactly do you mean by the Islamic movement?
Well, I was really more reflecting. I was really more reflecting on just some of our friends from Brunel the other day, and clearly this isn't this university. I apologise, actually, if I catch my teeth when I talk a little bit. I took a bit of a face fall the other day, straight into my two front teeth, and they're being removed just before Christmas, so all I want for Christmas is my two front teeth. Anywho, so they do allow Islamic extremists onto their campus, but they felt that my presence there would be particularly offensive. So the last Islamic extremist they had on campus in 2012 suggested throwing gays from mountains, and yet my appearance there the other day was sufficient to cause them to walk out. That's merely a jest, darling. Now, the good gentleman here was saying, do not think a vote against the motion is a vote against Katie Hopkins. Actually, I'm wanting you to reconsider that. I'm not sitting down, fear not. Although maybe actually you might be quite relieved. I'm saying do think of it as exactly that. And I'm going to tell you why I'm a great person and why I represent the tabloid so wholeheartedly and fundamentally that I think by the end of this short 10 minutes, you'll be with me all the way. I believe that to be a truth. I think it's going to happen. I know. Ever the optimist. Now, I did used to work for The Sun, but I've moved over. I was offered a job at the Mail Online, 230,000 unique views every few days, 230 million unique views each month. So I would suggest to you 20 million people reading a tabloid newspaper each day. I would suggest to you that perhaps they're onto something. I think maybe, unlike The Guardian and its whiffly-waffly brand of lunacy, actually, the tabloids have got something. We're not trying to be politically correct. We don't want the world to love us. We don't need necessarily for everything to be feminist happy and feminist pleasing. What we really want is to be entertaining. And I think if we think about it in terms of Cambridge, we would think about it in terms of the difference between the debating society and the student union. I think the broadsheets would be like the debating society, and I think the debating society, Jesus, that nearly went really badly wrong. The debating society would be just like the tabloids, kind of interesting, fun, magnetic, has a reason for people to want to come here. And I think the student union would be rather like the Guardian newspaper. Kind of, just 1 second, sweetie. Your last question also was really dull. So, so if I could ask, if this one could be kind of a little bit shorter, maybe have a point. We totally discussed EastEnders on your last one. So, but go.
Right. Surely you're just falling into the same trap again of confusing consumption with being morally good. I mean, regardless of what we think of the Union or Kusu, there's a simple dichotomy between consuming something and thinking that it's morally good. So I don't really see how your statistics help in this debate at all.
No, I'm not confusing consumption with something that's morally good, but if we say they're bad for Britain, I would just suggest they're definitely onto something, and perhaps Britain knows best. And I think there's two types of people that love the tabloid newspapers. I think there's really hard workers, so you'd have to exclude yourself from that, who actually see it as a little bit of light relief. They enjoy it because it's a light relief from a bit of day's hard work, isn't it? It's my white van men, who I love very dearly, and my black cabbies, who are also in my cohort. And then, of course, there's middle-class England, who sees it as a sort of guilty pleasure. You know, if you thought about whips and chains and leather, guilty pleasures that obviously we wouldn't want to talk about here. Anywho, I'll park that. I'm going to tell you why, anyhow, that being part of the tabloids, as I am, I'm kind of now very much wedded to tabloid culture, and I do love it very dearly, actually. I think we do have a way of bringing entertainment to people. News is no longer about the act of news, finding out what's going on in the world. News is about a light indulgence of one's moments of pleasure. People will click on the sidebar of shame, will they not? Every few moments of every day. Do you do that? Do you click on the sidebar of shame?
I do, but I also do try to find out about things going on in the world. So just to be clear, you did just say news is no longer about finding out what's going on in the world.
I think that's right. News is not a situation in which we act, but a mere spectacle for idle moments. And I think that sums up rather nicely what news has become, actually. I know we can all talk about immigrants washed up on beaches and try and make out that that photograph perhaps wasn't staged or wasn't taken by a woman, which it was, or wasn't taken from the feet because that woman knew exactly what she was doing. That was a staged and set up photo. Now, I know you guys would want to argue differently. I think
that's an astonishing thing to say.
It's a different story behind that, I think you'll find, because of course they did come from Turkey. They weren't actually migrants from Syria. And I think if you look behind the sort of thing that you guys buy into all too readily, that we should make up politics with our heart and not with our head, I think we end up with the sort of nonsense that the broadsheets kind of project upon us. People like to put down the tabloids, but I actually think perhaps we're a great deal more honest than the broadsheets and the stuff that you offer to us. But anyway, back to my point. The reason I feel like you should vote with us and say tabloids are not bad for Britain is because Katie Hopkins is not bad for Britain. Katie Hopkins is actually a really strong thing for Britain, something Britain could be proud of. Yes, darling? What word can I pick? One second. Point of information. What is it about darling you don't like?
Well, I just think it's really patronising.
Patronising? Yeah. Does it make you feel, is it a microaggression?
Anyway,
is this a safe space? Is this a safe space? Don't know. Carry on. I can't hear because you're sort of wafting the microphone about. That's your mouth there.
Isn't the whole point of, like, tabloid journalism, like photography in journalism, in order to show people what's going on in the world that they wouldn't have access to? So whether it's staged or not, that boy was dead on the beach, and it was important that we saw that, so we knew the full situation.
I don't think you did know the full situation. That's sort of my point, is the boy was moved, and the boy was taken from a certain position. I think what we ended up with, actually, was a migrant crisis that we now have as a result of Angela Merkel, the mother of all migrants, waving people into Europe. But we'll park that for right now. But back to my point, which is that I'm telling you why tabloids are a great thing for Britain, because Katie Hopkins is a great thing for Britain. And I think, actually, you know, it's partly because we do have these interesting lives. There's entertainment to be had in our daily lives. And that's the thing that we're selling to people. We're selling to people the idea that there is light relief, that there is fun, that you can find a hook for a story that isn't all bad news, doom and gloom. You guys have spent quite a lot of time telling us why tabloids are a really good thing. You guys probably did quite a good job of telling the rest of the audience why we should actually support the tabloids, why the tabloids are interesting, why they're good for Britain, the power of editorial in tabloids. Yes, I won't say darling.
Thank you.
Yeah. I came here with an open mind, and I actually, on a level, agree with you that the tabloid is great for light entertainment. I love nothing more than on the night after the Oscars, seeing all the dresses. I love that. And I will go on the Daily Mail, sidebar of shame, and I'll look at all the dresses. But to sit here and hear you just talk without any respect or humility about what's going on, I find abhorrent, and I'm really sorry because I know this is a big deal for, I think, you, this debate, and perhaps winning, but I'm actually going to leave now because I can't sit here and listen to you. I find it so upsetting. I think that thing you said at the beginning about the Islamic movement, people leaving, I think is so tasteless.
I think it was related to what happened a couple of weeks ago.
The video from the other university, and how you kind of spun it on Twitter saying, great, you rock, you've pushed me to trending on Twitter. At what point are you gonna take some accountability for what you're bringing as accepted views because you've got that platform? At what point are you gonna take accountability for it? Because the messages that you are pushing out into...
Shall I answer?
No, I actually want to keep talking, sorry.
You want to keep talking and then you're going to leave and there's
Yeah.
no answer? Well, then I
Yes.
might as well cut you off, really, because
Well,
if it's not an exchange of views, then it isn't a conversation. It's just
It is,
you
okay,
lecturing
I'm just
me.
asking,
And I'm not here to be lectured at, but I'm happy to exchange views with you.
Feel free then. Okay, I just want to know at what point
I'm not
you're
going to stop. You know, there's 50% of people in this country who I absolutely respect cannot stand me. I also, strangely, welcome their views. I bizarrely rather welcome yours. But on the opposite side, there's quite a lot of people, and this will reflect the power of the tabloid, the reason I'm employed there, that find it a refreshing change that views are somewhat stifled by broadsheets are allowed to be aired. Now, I appreciate those are going to be opposite views to yours, but they're still important views for me and for a proportion of the public.
Sure, but please don't get those mixed up with light entertainment, because that's not what it is.
No, but I think it's really important that we don't need to have a consensus. We don't need to find consensus here, although it'd be quite handy for the vote. But we don't need to find consensus on every opinion. We can have opposing views and sit in the same room and be supportive.
I think as the first gentleman who spoke, the person from The Guardian, said, you know, you can have different views, and brilliant, you can have those in The Guardian, but you don't have to put the whole kind of really pervasive language, pervasive ideas. I mean, talking about a staged dead child on a beach, what's the point?
Well, that is
It's a
what
dead
happened.
child.
But I also think the language of the tabloids is important because it's the language of the people. Not here,
It's not the
maybe.
language of the people. I'm sorry, it's really not.
Not maybe to you.
Okay, fine.
But outside of here, you know, we can watch Newsnight all we want. We can read The Observer all we want. We can have dismissive views about Great Britain all we want. But if no one's with us, no one's reading that stuff, no one's part of that wider conversation, and 20 million people are reading tabloids, they have got a language that does connect with people. And that's why I'm really passionate about them. They have a way of... I get that you don't like them. I get that you don't like
actually,
them.
if you listened, I said that I actually go
You
on
like
the
the
Daily Mail,
dresses?
and yeah, like I've got nothing wrong with it.
But I think it's
In the interest of time, we might have to make this the last response.
sorry.
But,
No, it's fine. You go.
by all means, have this response, and then we'll allow Katie to continue with her speech, and then hopefully continue this afterwards. But we do need to get through the debate, so please could you make this your last response?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
Please don't make horrid comments about dead children and link it to entertainment or light
Okay.
entertainment. It's not the same.
Okay. And also, I think what's really important about the tabloids is we give very clear views. So they're views that are black and white, and we allow people to make up that middle ground, that grey area, to have nuance. The Guardian would love to sell itself, broadsheets sell themselves on nuance, whereas we haven't really got the time for that. We have to cut, we have to make shortcuts to this decision, that decision, this opinion, that opinion. And that's kind of the population we represent. And those are the views that we represent. And I think we do a really good job of it. I don't think you can honestly say tabloids are bad for Britain. I think you can say tabloids are not your choice of newspaper, but I certainly don't think Katie Hopkins is bad for Britain, and I certainly don't think tabloids are bad for Britain either. Thank you. you.
Okay, we're going to have another round of floor speeches. This is your chance to contribute to the debate in a slightly more extended form. So if you'd like to make a point in proposition, if you disagree with Katie and Oliver so far, that tabloid, and believe that tabloids are bad for Britain, anyone like to make a point in proposition? Yeah. Oh, sorry, you've spoken. We'll go over here. Yeah, just over here.
I think something we're missing here is unintended consequences of what people say. So Ms. Hopkins might write something that she believes firmly to be true, but actually there's kind of spirals out of control. At the moment in Europe, we're seeing a rise of anti-Semitism, we're seeing a rise of anti-Islamic sentiment, we're seeing a rise of racism. Like, come on, what is good for Britain has got to be the opposite of that. We've got to make a concerted effort to tie ourselves together more coherently rather than set up divisions between ourselves. Debate, great, but not kind of throwaway comments.
Yeah, Oliver on that.
Take the entirety of the tabloid press and say that all those things you've mentioned are the fault of the tabloid press. It's ridiculous. Katie Hopkins potentially is the reason for that. But it's A, patronizing to suggest that the tabloid, sorry, it's A, incorrect and illogical to suggest the tabloid press can shape views to the extent that you've suggested. And second of all, I don't know who spoke, so I'm just looking at the audience. And sorry. And second of all, I think it's unfair to say the tabloid press are completely responsible for that.
Do we have a point in opposition of the motion? Anyone who, yep, down at the front.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to preface my speech with a disclaimer, which is that I qualify on all 3 Fs of Hopkin hate. I am fat, I'm foreign, and I've got a funny name. Despite that, Mr. President, there is a reason that the Facebook page I have stalked the most in the last week has not been the Conservative Party or the Labour Party or the Guardian. It has been Britain First, because I need someone to hate. I need, if I get a 4th, which is what I'll call it if I fail, if I get a 4th class degree, I need to know that I'm still better than someone, and that I'm still better than someone who says we need to use gunships to stop migrants. I absolutely believe that tabloids are essential for my self-esteem and for the self-esteem.
Do we have any points in abstention? Yeah, we'll go down at the front.
I suppose the question I want to ask is whether or not it's a good thing that we are confusing news with entertainment. I mean, news should perhaps be entertaining, but to say that to consume entertainment is slightly different from consuming news and what's actually going on in the world. It's just a kind of question I'd like to ask.
Both because I think people are enjoying engaging with the debate and because I'm partly terrified of not letting that guy at the back speak next time we come to abstention. We'll take a second round of floor speeches. So before we get to you, we need a point in proposition from someone. Yeah, at the back.
Hi, Elsa from Clare. I'd just like to say that there's been a lot of conversation about creating like the best kind of debate possible. But I think that given that tabloid press tends to breed a lot of hate, and like when people get very impassioned, it doesn't necessarily conclude like the best kind of debate possible. And I don't think that it necessarily makes people happy or makes people entertained. I think if people get more hateful, they don't necessarily like produce the best arguments. It just doesn't necessarily help things.
Do we have any points in opposition of the motion? Down at the front. Yeah, opposition of the motion.
I honestly think that like the tabloid press is very important because, like you said, Mr. President, it is a direct reflection of what society thinks. Not all of society, but a portion of society at least. And if we do disagree so vehemently with those claims, then surely, as a society, we should address those points and address maybe the ignorance in portions of society or whatever, instead of like saying, oh, it's so stupid and it's so dumb and look at us, we're so great and we feel so superior to it. In a way, we should address people like Katie Hopkins and their opinions and engage in a decent dialogue with them to educate them rather than just hate them all the time. Because honestly, it's not productive. I think honestly we should try to seek to educate those who maybe have incorrect views or views that are just like based on irrational evidence or whatever. So in a way, I am almost like the 1 in 5 Muslims who are sympathizing with terrorists.
Katie, do you want to respond to that?
No, it's probably better if we keep things going, isn't it?
Yes. Okay, in which case we'll move over here because there is someone super keen to speak in abstention. So I really hope this is good. Just keep speaking into it.
You sure? Oh, yeah, there we go. I'm Zach Blanchard. I'm from St. John's. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I'm kind of prone to random outburst. But so what I'm wondering, and I came in with a totally open mind, and I still am very unsure as to which side I'll end up voting. On one hand, I can certainly see how the sort of the vitriolic stance that I think probably makes tabloids so popular, how that could lead towards widening the gaps in society and creating, bridges and walls between different groups of people. On the other hand, I hosted several Chinese debaters for the debating conference 2 weeks ago, and I had a really interesting conversation with them after the tournament where they said that despite how there's no free speech in China as a whole, because of the overarching importance of political correctness within the American and European universities, that they're more limited in American and European debates than they were in China. And so I wonder on that hand frankly, this debate tonight has been, I think, certainly the most thought-provoking that I've been to, and I've been to several. So I have to wonder if sort of having people speaking their mind, whatever their mind is, if that doesn't have a lot of value in that sense.
Thank you, and indeed thank you to all of our floor speakers. So we're going to move on with the main debate now. We'll move on to our final speaker in proposition, who is Mr. Max Mosley. He is a qualified barrister and was formerly president of the FIA, the Worldwide Motoring Association and governing body. Mr. Mosley, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say a word about the Daily Mail, because Oliver, I gather, was pursued by it. Katie, I think, now writes for it. And I've had my odd run-in with the editor, Mr. Dacre, because as some of you may know, years ago, I sued the News of the World, and I won. And when this judgment came out in my favor, Mr. Dacre made a speech to the Society of Editors saying that I'd been guilty of, quote, unimaginable depravity. Now, I have to say that the article in the News of the World concerned something that I did with a number of young ladies, but it was entirely private, and it was nothing to do with anybody else. And I wouldn't say it was depraved. But of course, Mr. Dacre's idea of depravity is completely different from the rest of us. He thinks that it's depraved to leave the light on. I think he believes it's depraved to do anything other than adopt the missionary position, anything to do with sex. And so I don't feel that he's entirely representative. But that said, I'm greatly encouraged by the fact that Katie is now working for him, because I think she'll be able to advance his education. sorry, turning for a moment to the sort of serious part of this evening, I think the first thing one has to understand about the tabloids is that they are businesses run for profit. And there's nothing whatever wrong with that, but what is wrong is that they pretend they're some wonderful free press that is acting in the interests of society and not simply a business run for profit. And one of the things they say is that any attempt to restrict their activities is an attack on the free press. What they overlook is that, of course, no one could possibly describe the press in this country as free. You've got Mr. Murdoch, I think something like 39%, and then Rothermere and the Barclay twins, between them another 20, 30%. You've got something like 70% plus of the press completely controlled by some tax exiles, well, a pair of tax exiles in the form of the Barclay brothers, another tax exile, as I understand it, in the form of Rothermere, and then, of course, Murdoch, who's not even a Brit. He's not even a British subject. He sits over in New York, and he's the most powerful person in the country. No question that he is. And he decides what gets written primarily in The Sun. Now, nothing wrong with the tabloids as such, but the fact that they're controlled by a small coterie of people not only makes a mockery of the suggestion that it's a free press, but also you have to bear in mind that when they talk about parliamentary control, even if there were a suggestion of that, which there isn't, it would be an awful lot better than 3 or 4 unelected people who just happen to be rich enough to own newspapers. Now, looking for a moment at the News of the World, because it's an example, the worst thing about the tabloids is their cowardice. They are completely cowardly. And the best illustration of that is that everyone in that business, in the tabloid world, knew what Jimmy Savile was up to. They knew what Cyril Smith was up to. And what did they do? Nothing. Nothing. And in that period, on the other hand, who did they pick on? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples to set against Jimmy Savile and Cyril Smith. There was a man called Lewis in Wales in the 70s. He was a lay preacher. He was also a maths teacher, but he was a lay preacher. And at the weekends, he used to go off into the woods where he had a caravan and swing. I don't think I need explain what swinging is, but that's what he did. And the News of the World found out about this. They exposed him. Now, you imagine in a small Welsh village, you're a lay preacher, you're the local maths teacher, you're a respected figure, and suddenly it comes out that you like to go and swing at the weekends. And on the morning that the paper appeared, he hung himself. And then we have another example, somebody called Strong in the 90s. He was a chef, and he was divorced from his wife, married a new wife, lived in the north of France, and was another swinger. Now, again, the News of the World found out. They sent a couple of reporters. In fact, one of the reporters was the dreaded fake sheikh, Mazhar Mahmoud, early in his career. This was 1992. Turned up there, managed to get pictures of the man and his wife. And she was in sort of, they weren't dressed as you would dress if you were perhaps swinging. The reporters made their excuses and left. And because they could in those days, and did in those days, they rang him up, the poor chef, and said, we've got this story, we're going to publish it. Have you got a comment? And this produced panic for him. He then rang the editor. I think she was somebody called Patsy Chapman. I may have got that wrong, but I think that's right. And he said, look, please don't publish this story, because if you publish it, I will never see my children again. My divorced wife will never let me see my children again. It'll be the end of it for me. And they, of course, went ahead and published it, and he hung himself. Well, those are people, you might think that Lewis and Strong were the sort of people who didn't need the exposure that they got. And you might think that Savile and Smith were the sort of people who did need the exposure. And when they say, oh, but Savile would have sued us, well, of course he'd have sued them. But some of the greatest perjury trials and other criminal trials we've had have been people who've sued for libel and then found it's gone wrong on them. So it was just pure cowardice. Now, what would be, I would say, the main case against the tabloids is that they're not just cowardly, but they're utterly, utterly dishonest. And you see this dishonesty in the campaign against Leveson's proposals. For example, they will say these cost-shifting proposals. You probably know that part of Leveson is the suggestion that the newspapers, if they don't join a regulator, should pay the costs of both sides. So they say this is going to be enormously expensive, this is a disaster, this is an attack on the free press. The truth is, which they don't explain, that Leveson understood that it was a fundamental problem that there is no access to justice. There is no way that an ordinary person can sue a newspaper for either defamation or breach of privacy, because you can only do it if you can afford to risk £1 million. Leveson's way round this was to say the regulator should have an arbitral body that could settle these disputes and do so very economically. So it would mean that an ordinary person could actually get some sort of justice. Now, when I remember saying in the Leveson inquiry that I thought it completely wrong that only 1% of the population could afford to bring an action for breach of privacy or defamation. And Leveson turned to me and he said, I think you'll find it's less than that. And he's right. There are fewer than 1% of the population can afford to bring one of those actions. Well, how can you say you're living under the rule of law if 99+% of the population can't sue? If your private life is exposed because one of these newspapers thinks it'll be entertaining for their readers to do this, you have no redress at all, because what used to be the possibility of a conditional fee arrangement, if you could find the right solicitor, even that's being done away with. Well, it can't be right, but what's wrong is that they don't even debate the question. They pretend that there's some furious attack on the press by cost shifting, and therefore, in some way or another, these measures are damaging to the press. Well, it's extraordinary that they won't actually put the true facts in front and explain that this is an attempt to give access to justice for people who couldn't otherwise afford it. Worse than that, they say this is an attack on the local press, when in fact it's exactly the opposite. At the moment, if you are the rich local councillor and your local newspaper exposes something really bad that you're doing, you simply sue them. You know that you're going to lose, but they will only get 70% of their costs. If their costs are, say, £100,000 on each side, then it'll cost them. They will get 70% of the cost you have to pay, and they will end up £30,000 out of pocket. Well, they can't afford that. Or if you take a big scale, on the bigger scale, take the Financial Times. Imagine that they write something about an oligarch that annoys him, and he's very rich. So he sues. He knows he's going to lose, but the costs are £1 million on each side. The News of the World get the Financial Times get an order for costs against him. He will be ordered to pay 70% of their £1 million. They're left with £300,000 out of pocket. So the oligarch calls them up, and he says, don't do that again, because I can afford to do this as often as you like. And each time it's going to cost you £300,000 straight off your bottom line, quite apart from the management time you're going to lose. Well, nobody's in that situation. The Financial Times is not going to print the story. Now, all of those, what I've just said, are complete, straightforward facts. None of it will you read in the press, because the utter dishonesty that they have prevents them printing that. There are endless other examples, exemplary damages, lies about that, and so forth. But all I would ask is that we get a tabloid press which is prepared to tell the truth, put the truth in front of the public, which they're not prepared to do, and not to be blatantly cowardly when confronted with people like Saville and Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to conclude the case for the opposition, and indeed the debate as a whole, our final speaker tonight is Lord Black. He's the Executive Director at the Telegraph Media Group, a peer in the Lords, and was formerly Director of the Press Complaints Commission. Lord Black, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I should point out, of course, that there are two Lord Blacks. One used to own the Telegraph, liked dressing up as cardinals, and went to prison. I'm the other one. And in the wake of Katie Hopkins, I'm going to try to do my best to retrieve the situation. I don't know how to follow the wonderful, fascinating lecture we've just had on the cost-shifting regime of the Leveson settlement. But I ought to warn Mr. Mosley, I can bore for Britain on the Leveson inquiry, but I don't think I'm going to do it tonight. The one thing I will say to you is I am completely opposed to what Lord Justice Leveson tried to do in forcing newspapers who print the truth to bear the costs of a libel trial. I don't believe I'm a wholly dishonest person, and I hope we can move from that point. And I'd also say, just to pick up one point from the start, Jimmy Savile, yes, it was a terrible scandal. Who were the people that sat on the story for a very long time? The BBC. The BBC. Now, the topic we are debating this evening is perhaps one of the most crucial in a free society. And let's be clear about this. It's not about whether you approve of the Daily Mail or the Sun. It's not about whether you're offended by the Daily Star or the Mirror. It's about free speech and about the very nature of the liberal society we're privileged to live in. Now, some of you might be asking what I'm doing on this side of the debate. If you take a look at my background, you might think I should be sitting there. After all, I work for a broadsheet newspaper. For years, I dealt with complaints about the press, many of the most high-profile about popular newspapers. I was in the thick of it when Princess Diana died, and the paparazzi were in the dock. And in politics, I worked for a man who was routinely portrayed in some tabloids as a vampire. Indeed, the cover of one popular newspaper on polling day had him in a coffin with a stake through his heart. I had to break that news to him on the phone at 5 o'clock that morning. That was great fun. So surely I should be over there siding with the censors and their elitists in their ivory towers, condemning the tabloids, not praising them. Well, the reason I'm on this side is because I'm a Democrat, and I believe the fate of the popular press is intimately bound up with our democracy and our future as a nation of free people. I'm a historian, and I know that the first act of any dictator is to undermine, attack, and then ban popular newspapers, and I believe in free speech.
I just think we should absolutely, I just think we're absolutely not suggesting banning anything. We're not saying that the existence of tabloid newspapers per se is a bad thing. We just think they should be better.
I haven't accused you of wanting to ban anything. I'm saying that's what's happened in the past. There is a very thin dividing line that goes from condemning something which is essential to free speech and taking action against it. So yes, I do believe in free speech. It's what President Roosevelt rightly said was one of the 4 fundamental freedoms of mankind. And in the spirit of free speech, let me say that I, of course, respect the opinion of all those who have derided the tabloids this evening, and by extension, the popular culture they write about. I disagree profoundly with what they say, but I defend to my last their right to say it. And formidable opponents, though they may be, on this issue, they're fundamentally wrong, wrong in their arguments, and wrong, Mr. President, on the side of history. As a result of the digital revolution that's changing the face of the world, free speech is on the march. And even Mr. Mosley and his friends in the hacked-off brigade can't stop that. In countries like North Korea and Egypt, whose absence of tabloid newspapers may make them role models for those proposing this motion, there are flutterings of free expression on the internet. Nobody can turn that clock back, though in reality, that's what those who are proposing the motion want to happen. Back to the days of the 19th century, the glory days before the Daily Mail and the Daily Express took root when Britain's ruling classes prevented anyone other than the elite from getting access to information and keeping them in subjugation. And ladies and gentlemen, remember this. Yes, sir.
Does the speaker believe that Rupert Murdoch controlling these many newspapers makes the British press any freer than Pravda and Izvestia?
I think in the scale of the global digital media now, Rupert Murdoch is just one player in a huge marketplace, and to say that he dominates the media is just takes no account of the huge revolution that has taken place in the British and the worldwide media over all these years. And ladies and gentlemen, we should remember that it was the popular press which helped Britain become a modern country in which government was held up to scrutiny and account. In the days of the late 19th century, when Britain was becoming a democracy and when women's rights and workers' rights were respected for the first time, it was the Daily Mail and the Daily Express that were actually forcing that pace on. In the First World War, it was the Daily Mail which highlighted the failures of policy to supply adequate ammunition. Yes, sir? But we need to understand, as I will come on to, we need to understand the heritage of what Britain's tabloids is all about to be able to understand today. Because the point is that ever since then, popular newspapers have gone on to expose wrongdoing and corruption and hypocrisy and injustice, from unmasking the murderers of Stephen Lawrence to winning compensation for wounded servicemen, helping the victims of disaster and the veterans of Bomber Command, to exposing the activities of the English Defence League, or match fixing, or revealing the extent of friendly fire in the Iraq War. The list goes on and on. That is the vital campaigning role of the free press. I'll take one more, but then I'm going to run out of time. I've just been told not to dwell on the history, so I won't do that. And as importantly, as we heard a little earlier, the tabloids bring hard news and information to their readers in a digestible way. A large issue of The Sun, Mr. President, may contain over 100 pages and 300 individual items, adding up to 10,000 items of news over the course of the year. And for readers of The Sun and The Mirror, that's what connects them to Parliament and to power and gives them the information they need to make informed choices. If you believe that's bad for Britain, you can't believe in democracy. Now, of course, those stories are not always about global warming or the price of quinoa or the latest exhibition at the Tate Modern. Yes, some of them are about celebrities, about scandal, about soap operas, and about behavior that outrages the public. And yes, these are often titillating stories about footballers or royals or contestants on Strictly Come Dancing. And just ask yourself for one moment, what happens to those stories when they've been written? Do they just sit in the tabloids? No, the answer is that upmarket radio and television outlets turn them into weighty issues that they want to comment on. Popular newspapers provoke outrage among readers by, say, depicting drunken hedonism at top universities. What happens? The broadcasters then talk about morality and privilege in higher education. The popular newspapers write about Prince Harry's latest shenanigans. The broadcasters speculate about the future of the monarchy. Without tabloid newspapers pushing the agenda, the BBC would be even duller. Now, I have to tell you, the reason that it's important that they are allowed to write about celebrities, the reason that upsets some people about them, is because newspapers are businesses. Mr. Mosley was right. Of course we're businesses. If we don't create profits, we don't exist. And if we don't exist, we don't have a free society. Don't just take my word from it. Here is one view from a very senior person. Quotes, "It is important to underline that the press carries out a valuable role in entertaining its readers according to their tastes and interests. Indeed, if it failed in this important respect, readers would desert to other forms of electronic media." And who was that? Mr. Mosley's friend Paul Dacre? Rupert Murdoch? No, the great high priest of censorship himself, Mr. Lord Justice Leveson. He made that very important point. When considering how to vote in a short while, ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask you to think about three things. First, for a modern democracy to function, you need to have a plurality of voices in the media, imparting information to electors in a whole variety of ways, from the Daily Star to the FT, from the Sunday Mail to the Times Literary Supplement. The fewer voices there are, the less well democracy will function. Only connect, E.M. Forster, one of the greatest products of kings, once said when talking about newspapers. Well, it's the popular newspapers that can connect. Second, The essence of free speech, and that's where I come back to the point that I started on, is that from time to time, people will express views that we don't like, campaign against things in a robust manner, and in Churchill's phrase to one of his generals, pester, nag, and bite those in the public eye. They may do it using language and tactics that upset some of us. They may have to go into the realms of privacy, but their ability to do that, to deploy shock and awe, to make a fuss, to pontificate, crusade, and to be bloody-minded, those are the very essence of a free press that holds people to account. And finally, as someone, I can't, so I've run out of time, someone who's spent his life in the media, I know what a vital role the popular press plays in powering the creative economy. That economy is worth £77 billion every year and employs 2.8 million people. It's a crucial part of UK PLC, and we should not be denigrating the most vivacious part of it. If you value that creative economy, if you want a job in it, then you cannot support this motion. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's not a threat. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're Democrats, you have to oppose this motion. If you believe in a crusading free press that tells truth to power, you have to oppose the motion. If you believe in a vibrant, robust, creative economy, then you have to oppose the motion. And if you believe, as I do, that the popular press is actually good for Britain, that is in fact a very special part of it, we should lavish praise on it, not opprobrium. Ladies and gentlemen, throw this motion out.
Thank you, Lord Black, and indeed thank you to all of our speakers tonight. In fact, my last thank you tonight goes to all of you. This, as I'm sure you know, has been the last debate of term, but also the last debate of our 200th anniversary year. So to all of you who've come along tonight, all of you who've been part of the debates throughout the year, thank you for being part of the society. And as you move to vote tonight, that will be the last thing you do here this year. I'm sure this debate is going to continue in the bar, so do head through there. We will announce the results there in about 15 minutes. But as you leave, the door through which you leave is as ever significant. Eyes to the right, nose to the left, and abstentions through the middle. Thank you very much and have a good Christmas.